Side-by-side comparison. Stanley Rabbet plane. Okay, the Stanley Rabbet plane has only one bar for the fence, just a single bar, and as you can see, there's nothing to keep the bar from rotating. You can also see that there is no clearance between the fence and where the blade goes through. There's a teeny bit of clearance there, but very little. So if you're taking an aggressive rabbit, you got to be careful that you don't extend the blade so far that it hits the fence. The width of the sole is 1 3/4 inches. So generally, if you want your fence to stay set, you're going to have to put the fence under the sole to some extent. And that will limit it to obviously less than 1 3/4 inches. You can't really tighten these nuts enough by hand to keep that there, even for a reasonably gentle, so you have to use a flat-bladed screwdriver for that adjustment. The blade adjustment has no mechanism for moving the blade in or out. It does have the lever that you can lift up and down that moves it in and out a teeny amount, but that's just for the most basic of adjustments. The problem with this lever is that the action of the lever is in line with the force on the blade. So that means that when you plane and put force on the blade, it pushes the lever downwards and the blade up. So when you're planing, you actually have to put your finger in here and keep that adjustment lever at the point where you're taking the amount of shaving that you want. And you have to be careful with that adjustment, because a small adjustment can be the difference between a nice finishing plane and a very aggressive rippy one. The knob for the lever cap is nicely knurled and large enough that you can easily tighten it sufficiently to keep things mostly in place. There is no screw slot in it, so adjusting it with a screwdriver isn't possible. You can, of course, adjust this lever screw to give this a little bit more oomph in its leverage. The depth adjuster can only be adjusted with a screwdriver. There are no knurls on the knob at all. It rides up and down in a very thin little track, but the amount of burr on the back of the depth stop is very little. And it has the problem is that it is got that little ridge on both sides. So while one side has the ridge line to run in, the other does not. So when you put it on there, you wind up with the depth stop at a slight angle, and that means that that round slot does not engage well. Even if you put it in and tighten it down significantly, if you hit something, it can still knock it out of its slot. So you do need to be careful about that. It is a good depth stop, though, in that it does retain its position very well. And it's easy enough to set with a ruler or a caliper. and it stays in position reasonably well for clamping it down with the screwdriver. So all in all, it's not a bad little machine.